Hi, I'm Mike Fotenopulos. I am the academic coach for Springdale Public Schools, and today I want to talk about taking the ACT test. And specifically, I would like to talk about taking the ACT math section of the ACT test. But before we talk about any of that, I'd like to just kind of begin, as I always do when I talk about the ACT test, and ask you, what do you think the ACT test stands for? The A and the C and the T. A lot of times when I ask this question, students come up with really convoluted, difficult responses, when in fact it is the American College Test, ACT, American College Test. How simple is that? And it's that simple idea that I want to keep at the forefront as we continue to talk about this ACT math test. It's simpler than you think, and what makes it simple is it's predictable. There's consistencies all throughout the ACT test itself. Specifically speaking, it's always tested the same way. That is to say, the English part is first, and then the math, and then the reading, and then the science. And then within each section, in this case the math section, there's consistencies. Let's talk about those as we move on today. So why take the ACT test? The ACT test is important on many reasons, but the biggest one is because it's used by American colleges to find out if you're ready for college. They use a scoring system, 1 being the lowest and 36 being the highest. Many colleges have their own number that they use to see if you're college ready for that university. For instance, the University of Arkansas, it's a 21. So that's the number that we're going to use as we talk about this ACT math test today. Also, each section of the test is scored in the same way. The overall test is a 1 through 36 scale, and each section is a 1 through 36 scale. The ACT organization itself thinks that you're math ready if you have a 22 in math. So keep that in mind as well. Let's refer to this raw data. It's the raw scores that you will find at the back end of any of our guidebooks or any of the, if you will, the preparing for the ACT test that your counselor can give you. And here you can find out what it is you need to make on the ACT test. And again, this might help us kind of come to that realization that this test isn't as hard as we once might have thought. As we spoke in other videos, the English section, if I wanted to get that 21, I'd have to get somewhere between 45 and 50 questions out of 75 correct. The same thing can be said for mathematics. Here I am, I'm looking to try to get a 21, and so I need to get 30 to 31 out of 60 questions correct. Again, that's half. In a math class, if you got half of the questions right, that'd be an F. But we're not looking at it like that. I want you to think about trying to get half of these math questions correct, and you're going to be ready to go to the University of Arkansas. Maybe a little bit more than half. If I scoot up there, 22 is what the ACT people consider to be math ready. So that's a 32 to 33. This whole scale will move a little bit depending on every ACT test that's given, but it's not moving a lot. Another consistency that we'll find with the ACT test. So let's talk about predictabilities within this ACT test. Number one, we just discussed the chart and how predictable that is. Number two, let's talk about the math test itself. It's 60 questions long, and you get 60 minutes. Also, you're allowed to use calculators. Another predictable measure is that the ACT people or their organization design every ACT test so that you can take the test without a calculator. So you don't necessarily need one. But if you're going to use one, make sure that you've chatted with your math teacher to see if it actually is legal to use. If you want to know that and your math teacher doesn't know, both of you can explore that on act.org. Also, if you're going to use a calculator on the ACT test, you need to use the calculator before you take the test. Using your calculator only on the day of the exam and getting comfortable with the function buttons and what it can do is going to waste time. Also, another consistency that you're going to find every time you take an ACT test is the directions do not change. The directions are always the same. So read the directions to the math section well before you ever take the test. As you're studying and preparing, that way, again, you're not wasting valuable 60 minutes of that time reading directions or playing with your calculator, as we talked about earlier. Get all that stuff worked out beforehand. Now let's talk about what to expect when you take the ACT test. It too is full of consistencies. And as I turn the pages here, I want you to feel free to pause this video at any time and write down any of the ideas that I'm talking about, especially the ones that might seem a little foreign to you. You can write those down and then go back and look those up or talk to your teacher about them. For instance, did you know that most of the math that you're fixing to do on the ACT test is going to be done, or you will have learned it rather, somewhere in about beginning in the 7th grade? And it will top out somewhere about in the top of the 10th grade or maybe the 11th grade. So again, the ACT people are going to ask you questions that you should already know. The difference is they're asking you in almost combination forms. Just like you learned Algebra 1 in 1 year, or forms of geometry in 1 full year, the ACT people are going to ask you maybe questions that deal with algebraic or geometrical questions that are combined with other issues that you learned in previous years. So as I go through these, maybe you'll want to write these down and see what it is that, where you're weak at, where you're strong at, and where you might want to put your attention in the future. And we're going to start off with the first style of question that you're going to see is preparing for higher math questions. There's about 35 of these questions on the test. There's subcategories that you need to pay attention to when you're preparing for higher math and preparing for higher math questions. Again, about 6 of these questions will be numbers and quantities questions. That is to say both real and complex number systems. That is to say integers, rational exponents, vectors, and matrices. About 6 of these questions will come from the numbers and quantity systems. About 8 questions on this test will deal with algebra. Linear algebra, polynomial algebra, radical and exponential relationships, and again, simple matrices will be asked. That's about 8 questions. Functions. You need to know functions. There's going to be about 8 questions about functions. Linear, radical, piecewise, polynomial, and logarithmic functions. And there's also going to be geometry questions, about 8. How are geometrical shapes composed? Solving for missing values that you might find in a geometrical shape, like circles and triangles, etc. And again, there's going to be some trig ratios as well. Statistics and probability. You're going to see about 6 questions dealing with statistics and probability. You need to be able to determine the center and the spread of distributions, data collection methods, and of course, you need to be able to calculate probabilities. Secondly, there's going to be about 25 questions of integrated essential math questions. Now, these are the questions that you might have learned in the 7th grade and the 8th grade. And so for you students that are in higher forms of math taking the ACT test now, this is the one that you might need to pay attention to. That is to say, you need to understand rates and percentages, areas and surface areas, volumes, averages versus medians. And you'll have to solve problems that are longer in complexity. Also, in a final group, you're going to see modeling. Modeling will take place in about 10 to 13 questions. And this is where I was talking about having those combinations of ideas, where it's not just one simple question that they're asking, but perhaps they've got 2 or 3 questions that are designated to one specific area. As you can see here, using the following information to answer questions 33 through 36, here they're going to give you an idea, and then you're going to use that idea to answer the following questions. And in this modeling, you're going to have to produce, interpret, understand, evaluate, and improve some of the models that you see here in this math section. This is why it's so important to answer the whole question. Many times students think they need to know this formula or that formula. Come to find out, knowing the formula was half the question. This is just another one of the consistent ideas that the math section has. Another one is, as you cruise through the math test, it's going to get a little bit more difficult as you go along. In layman's terms, the easy stuff's at the beginning and the more difficult stuff is at the end. But with that known, you can also learn. For instance, I haven't taken a math class in several years. So if I were to take the ACT test and know that I've got the ACT math test in my future, I'm going to study. But I'm also going to understand that my math expertise probably is not going to be awesome when I get to numbers 40 through 60. But I can probably handle those questions, numbers 1 through 39 or 40. So that's where I want to spend most of my time as a test taker. In other words, I don't want to hustle through numbers 1 through 40, knowing that I'm probably going to be in trouble when I get to numbers 41 through 60. And again, another consistent moment takes place with the ACT test. All the ACT people are worried about is how many you get right. How many you miss? Not so much. So guessing is okay. So that's another thing that I might want to figure out before I take the test is what's the best answer to guess? Some students say C. Research has shown that it's B. On the ACT test, B is the best answer. And if you want to know, or if you really want to test that, again, when you've got a test booklet in front of you, look at numbers 40 through 60 and look how many times the second answer is the best answer. I bet you're going to find that most oftentimes, about 17 to 18% of the time, it's B. Again, think of the ACT test as simple. Sure, it's difficult in places and it's got that history behind it, if you will. But once you understand some of the things that's going on and its consistencies, maybe it's not so scary after all. It's rigorous, and as we said earlier, the math people or the ACT people feel that to be math ready, you need a 22. So go back and think about how many do I have to get right to get that 22? How many do I have to get right to get that 21? To be accepted to the University of Arkansas, for instance. And you'll see that it's just a little bit above half. Again, get to practicing. Work with friends. You and a friend can sit there at lunch and work on a problem together. And the reason I ask you to do that is because I want you to see how some of your friends approach math problems. Maybe they approach them differently than you. And to hear someone else approach a math problem and see that done out loud, you might just find that there's something you've been missing all along. Also, ask your teacher. They're a valuable resource. When you see them in class setting, that's one thing. But to come up to your teacher in private and say, can I get some help here? Oh, that's wonderful. Another idea is, of course, using our boot camps that we have in both of our high schools and all three of our schools throughout the Springdale Public School District, be it at the Don Tyson School of Innovation, at Springdale High School, or at HAR-BER High School. There's boot camps every year that gets you ready for every ACT test. So take advantage of those. Also, on the World Wide Web, I simply go to Google and I type in Google ACT Math. All kinds of stuff pop up. I would do this, ACT Math Mario, M-A-R-I-O. Mario is a wonderful math teacher. And what he'll do when you enter those into Google and enter ACT Math Mario is you're going to see him, Mario, basically perform 1 through 60 in this book that I have in front of me. And he'll do them 10 questions at a time. And you can sit there and work along with him. In other words, he's going to express to you all of the correct answers and why they're the correct answers, and do it at your leisure. Push pause and play whenever you want. And if you take a look there, he's got another video that takes about 40 minutes that goes over all of the different pieces of curriculum that I just suggested. So again, that's out there. Go to apps that are free. both the ACT and SAT have many apps out there that are free that you can put on your phone and have a question of the day. Again, gearing yourself ready to take the ACT test. One other thing is, of course, what ACT offers. You can go to ACT Academy or ACT Open Ed. Both of those are wonderful devices where you can ask, again, interactive questions with those websites and plug in your own ACT scores once you've taken the ACT test and become that much more personalized with your learning. Also, you can go there beforehand and just ask it questions. Maybe you didn't know what an integer was earlier when I said the word integer or an exponent, or maybe you don't remember the rules of an exponent. Again, go to ACT Academy or ACT Open Ed or even the Khan Academy and type in rules for the integer and just see what you get. Most of all, you got to work. Oftentimes when I ask students, if they were to see a valedictorian walk across the stage at graduation, that person who has the highest GPA of all the students in a graduating class, I ask them, what do you think about that student? A lot of times students take a look at that person and say, wow, that person's really smart. Or they say, he's lucky. That's not the idea I wish they would take. When I see someone walk across the stage of a graduation who has the highest GPA, is considered the valedictorian, or the second place, the salutatorian, I look at somebody who's worked really hard. And that's exactly what it takes to get to do and to perform well on this ACT test. You've got to work hard. You've got to practice. So we've given you some tools. Get out there, see what's out there, get better at this ACT test, and good luck.